Hello my friends, and welcome back to my painting channel. And in this video we are going to be painting Claire Redfield from the Resident Evil 2 board game. And this is Claire and the model just here. I've kind of fallen in love with these little Resident Evil models. They're from the Steam Forged Games company, and the little models, they're very small, and some of them have some good details to them, but they just have so much character, especially if you're a fan of the Resident Evil series. They do hold quite a little element of nostalgia for me from playing from the old games years ago. So I've had a little bit of a falling in love with them. So we're just going to paint Claire here, and we're just going to start off by doing all of the skin tones. And for this one I'm changing up a little bit, and we're just going to use a Vallejo rosy flesh tone. And this one should hopefully give her a little bit more of a sort of a little bit of a lighter pink skin tone as we go. Now from there, that's all we're going to do is just use the Army Painter Flesh Wash, or a Reichland Flesh Shade if you like. And I'm putting too much Flesh Wash on the model here just for a moment, just to kind of give you an idea as to how I spread the Flesh Wash around. Now, it's completely wrong to put too much on like this, but this is what I wanted to show you, is that it is an easy mistake to make by putting too much wash onto your miniature. However, this is something that using a fresh brush or a sort of slightly damp brush, you can manipulate and move around the model quite easily, so it can be quite easily fixed. So if you kind of go a little bit too overboard, don't worry too much. Just try to use a cleaner brush or a slightly damp brush and just move that wash around a little bit and have a little bit more control, because ideally all you want to do is allow a small amount of the wash to sit in all of the recessed points. Now once that's dry, I'm just going to mix in a little bit of rosy flesh with the basic skin tone that I normally use for some of my other skin tones when I'm painting models. And we're just going to repaint the highlighted areas. And what we're going to do is, as always, we're just going to try and avoid where the shade and the wash has dried down into the recessed points, so just into the areas around where the clothing is, and obviously in the eye sockets and around the mouth and things like that. So we're just going to paint this as much as we can while avoiding those areas. Now once that's dry, we're just going to go straight to the basic skin tone. So this is the next highlight, so we're just going to try and use this just a little bit higher up. So again, just across things like the raised cheekbones, the nose, the forehead, the chin and things like that. But we're also going to be a little bit more selective now, where we paint in on things like the legs and the arms. And the reason for that is, if we can be a little bit more controlled as to where we place the paint on the legs, around the kneecaps here, and sort of just building in these sort of brush strokes down, if we leave one or two little gaps and things like that, we can kind of create an element or an illusion of sort of muscle tone and definition as well. Now, as I normally say when we paint in the skin tones, by using the nice thin down paints, this highlighted colour is going to blend quite nicely into the miniature, so it's going to allow it to look a lot smoother and a lot nicer as a transition on the eye when you're looking at this model and you're playing the game. Now, bearing in mind, as I said, these models are quite small, but they are really cool little models that are full of character. So take your time when you're painting the skin, because kind of doing these little brush strokes, sometimes you can make little mistakes here and there, but it's a little fun and rewarding area to paint. Skin is one of those really rewarding parts of the miniature to paint, because once you get it right, it really does make that model pop. So it's worth spending that little bit of extra time just trying to get used to sort of where the raised areas are. So we're moving on from the basic skin tone, and we're just mixing that with the light flesh as well. And again, using thinned down paints, we're just going to use those same sort of brush strokes with little areas that we leave in to kind of build that little bit of an idea of muscle tone and definition just across the legs here, and again just across the arms as well. Trying to paint sort of the more raised points, and as you can see, I'm just doing a little bit across the fingers here as well, just to give you an idea that Claire's wearing fingerless gloves, and we're painting those bits of the skin up as well. So once you're at that stage, we're kind of done with the skin. I mean, you could push that further and just use, sort of another really high highlight. But from this sort of perspective and the paint job that I'm doing here, trying to keep things nice and simple and quick and easy, that's absolutely fine for this model. So we're going to move on now, and we're just going to paint some of the darker areas now. So what I'm painting here is I'm painting the shorts, the gloves, the pistol as well, and just things like the sleeves and things like that. Now I'm using an AK Interactive paint for this because I bought a few different AK Interactive paints recently, and I'm using a tenebrous grey. But if you don't want to use a tenebrous grey and you're sticking with your Vallejo set, you can by all means just use a nice flat black colour, and that would work perfectly well. Now, to get Claire's jacket to look kind of like it does in the game and in the sort of original artwork, I'm mixing two different colours together. So I'm mixing bloody red, one of my favourite red colours, not just for the colour, but it's also nice and fun to say. But we're also mixing that with a pale flesh as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this sort of like rosy red sort of pink colour. And this is going to make this into like a sort of pink denim set. And this should match her colour from sort of the game and the original artwork quite nicely. I don't have a colour here that is sort of an equal match to this, so I kind of made my own. And I think the colour really does pop, and it really does stand out. It is a really good little matchup. Now you've got a choice then. If you want to stick true to the really original art, you could use the same colour pink on the shorts as well, because Claire's kind of wearing sort of an all-in-one piece denim sort of set. However, just to break this one up, I decided to paint the bottom half sort of like a denim blue. So I'm using an ultramarine blue. And the reason for this is just to mix those colours so that it makes it a little bit nicer to look at, because I didn't want to paint the whole thing one colour and then kind of lose some of the character and some of the definition by having it all one colour. So just going to mix things up a little bit. Now moving on to one of my favourite colours again, and I'm just using here a dark rust, and this is a really dark brown colour. And so this, I'm painting both the boots and the hair to begin with, and this is going to be a really nice dark base colour for those areas, so the hair and things like that, and we'll build those up a little bit later. We're also just going to paint the belt strap just across the middle here. So just trying to be as careful as possible. I mean, we're going to wash this down and then build it back up anyway, but it's always good to be nice and careful as you build. So there she is with all of the base colours done. Oh, no, I tell a lie. We're just moving on and just using a slight light earth colour just on the handle of the dagger. Now, the light earth colour is quite similar, slightly different, but it is quite similar to a khaki colour. So I'm just using kind of like a khaki colour for the handle. So if you're looking at something that would be quite similar, just using a nice khaki colour would be great. Now I've got a mixture of different colours here to paint the emblem on the back of her jacket. Now I've taken a look online and really spent a bit of time sort of researching what sort of motif she's got on the back of her jacket. And it seems like she's got sort of like an angel bomber girl on the back. And the bombs and the writing all seems to be like a bright yellow, sort of a gold colour. So I'm starting with using a gold yellow for those. And once that's dry, I'm moving back onto the ultramarine blue, and the sort of angel, the bomber angel just sat in the middle, seems to be wearing a blue dress. So I'm painting a very small part of the motif blue. Then I'm using the basic skin tone to just kind of pick out the limbs. So as you can see, there's these little legs here using the very tip of the brush. And there's also an arm then just across the top sort of area here. And a little bit of the face. Now, it is quite hard to see, as I said, these models are quite small, but as you paint these little bits together, it does all sort of come together, and it does sort of, you can sort of see the pattern emerging as you paint in. So just take your time with this, and just use the very tip of your brush. Now, using that gold yellow again, I'm just adding a little bit just to the back part of the face, sort of just so this paints in a little bit of the golden sort of blonde hair on the motif as well on this angel, as you can see there. And then I'm also just using a little bit of sombre grey just to paint the wing at the moment, because the wings on the motif that I've seen, they're not sort of like a bright white, they are sort of toned down, sort of like grey colours and sort of slightly darker sort of colours. Now once we've done all of the base colours and all of the base coats, I'm just going to quickly go across this with a nice dark black wash. So for this I'm using a Citadel Null Oil wash, and I've mixed a tiny amount of water with this one because I don't want it to darken the miniature down too much. So I'm just trying to get this into all of the creases and all of the cracks and all of the folds of the clothing and things like that. So this is going to build up depth in the quickest and easiest way that we can think. So painting this across the hair as well, because when we start to build the hair back up, you'll see then that this will add a nice element of depth to the miniature. So this is a nice quick and easy way of painting Claire. You can spend a lot more time sort of going into detail with a lot more of the blending and things like that. If you just wanted to play the game with, you could stop there and that would be good enough for tabletop standards, but we're going to push it a little bit more and we're going to build up the colours a little bit better. So going where we've painted the black or the tenebrous grey, we're going to start building this up by using a German grey colour. Now German grey is a very, very dark grey. It does have a very subtle light hint of blue to it, so this does separate the colour from the original sort of black or tenebrous grey, really, really sort of dark grey that we put down originally. And again, by using the tip of the brush and leaving some little lines in between, just here across the sleeve, we are going to sort of slowly create the element of creases and folds in the cloth. Now what I'm doing is I'm just adding a small amount of sombre grey into that German grey, and by a small amount I mean just like a small dot, and I'm just building up to see sort of where this sombre grey would be quite good. I'd probably say I've used about 20% sombre grey, 80% German grey, and it's only a small hint because sombre grey does take over that German grey quite a lot and it will turn it quite blue. So instead of allowing the sombre grey to take over, we're only using a small amount just as a highlight. So we're going back to what we've done with the German grey, only this time we're just sort of like making a little bit more of a highlighted colour and a highlighted tone. So again, like I say, leave in some of those little brush strokes so that it creates the folds, the depth, the definition and things like that, but just a subtle highlight, a subtle tone. And then we're going to do the same thing with these shorts. So we're just going to use the very, very tip of the brush, because again, like I say, these models are quite small, and we're just going to use these little scratches, little brush strokes, little taps and sort of dots and things like that, just to try to pick out as much of the detail as we can, because that wash has sort of toned down the colour a little bit. Not too much because we added a little bit of water, but because it has toned it down a little, we're just going to build our colour back up and get this vibrancy to sort of boost and pop a little bit better. So just using this ultramarine colour, we're just going to be as careful as we can to pick out all of those creases. As you can see, especially just on the front of the shorts, it's quite difficult to get into the front, just around where the creases are, because of the sculpt, the way that she's holding the pistol. But take your time and have fun with it. And once that area is dry and once that layer is dry, we're going to add a highlighted layer onto the shorts as well. So we're using the ultramarine blue, and I'm also using a Vallejo pastel blue, and I've mixed these two together about 50-50, and this is a nice thin down layer as well, so that the transition of the highlight is going to look a lot better. Now, being jeans and being sort of like a jean short kind of thing, these kinds of highlights will look quite cool, because it's almost as if like sort of the colour is fading out of them and things like that, so it'll make them look a little bit more worn and a little bit more used, and that's kind of the effect that we want. We don't want everything to look lovely and gorgeous, we kind of want it to be a little bit more rough and ready as well. So again, as you can see, I'm just using the very, very, very tip of the brush, just trying to catch as much of the details as I can, leaving sort of the shaded areas and the original highlighted areas and things like that, and we're just going to kind of build up from there and add that texture and that detail. Now, one of my favourite parts on painting this miniature is such a rewarding but such an easy part of the miniature to paint. What we're going to do is we're painting the frayed area to these jeans, so we're painting the frayed area to the denim. And that's all we're using is a pastel blue from Vallejo, which is a really nice light blue, and using a very thin coat, just using the very, very tip of the brush. As you can see, I'm just dabbing this right across the very edge of the jean shorts, and by doing so, we're creating this extreme sort of highlight where it looks like the jeans have faded and been ripped, and the colour difference makes them look frayed and worn. And it's such a cool little effect, but so quick and easy to do. So yeah, just using the very tip of your brush with a nice highlight, just tapping that across, and it looks really, really striking on the model as well. And now you can see that sort of these combination of two colours is starting to show through, rather than it all being one sort of red colour or one sort of pink colour. We're starting to get a little bit of more character out of the model now as well. So we're going back to that pink concoction that we made, that bloody red and pale flesh, and we're just going to paint this back up, leaving the sort of shade in the recesses again. As you can see, just kind of like painting by numbers. I'm just picking out the raised areas and using the very tip of the brush, leaving sort of brush strokes so that it adds a little bit more texture and tone to it. Now, to get this colour of the bloody red pale flesh mix, I pretty much mixed the two of them equal parts. So they've pretty much done 50-50, so it's just one blob of each. A perfect, simple, easy colour to make, easy colour to mix. And I found this to be just the perfect blend for Claire's sort of original sort of colour tone. Because when you look at the artwork, although it's red, because it's kind of like denim, it's faded, so it's kind of washed out, and you don't want it to be like a really, really bright, vibrant, over-the-top red, because I don't think that would suit sort of the character and the original artwork in the same sort of way. So as we've done sort of the clothing, I didn't do a sort of highlighted layer to the top half of the denim, because that pink sort of combination works really, really well already. You could add a little bit more of the lighter pink, but I didn't want to take away from the original colour that we had made. So once we've done that, just going to move on to the hair. Now you could dry brush the hair if you want. I tend to say to people, you could dry brush as much as you like. I tend to try not to dry brush too much, because I like the idea of sitting down and having controlled brush strokes. So that's what we do in here. We're using the mix of the dark rust and the leather brown together, and I'm just using the very tip of the brush to try to pick out some of those raised, highlighted areas where the hair is sort of moving and flowing. And once we've done that area, we're then just going to use the leather brown on its own. And again, in nice thinned layers, thinned coats, we're just going to pick out where the sort of highlight is hitting the hair. So we're just catching some of the raised areas with the very, very, very tip of the brush. And this is going to highlight the hair quite nicely, but it's more controlled than using a dry brush. Because although you can dry brush, sometimes you don't kind of have control as to how much paint you're catching on each part or each area. So I like to have just a little bit more control, even when the models are quite small like this. It's still worth a little bit of extra time, because when this model is on your board and you're playing, people are going to notice sort of all those little details and extras that you've put in. So it's always worth doing that little bit extra. And okay, cool, so the next stage is something nice and quick and easy, and pretty much just for the boots, I'm just going to stipple a few colours together. So I'm just using a leather brown from AK Interactive here, and you can use sort of any combination of like leather browns or kind of like leathers that you would like to paint, or sort of the kind of way that you would normally paint leathers. And pretty much that's all I'm doing is I'm just stippling the very, very tip of the brush. I'm just sort of, with a frayed open old brush, as you can see, I'm just stippling just around those boots, just that colour, so that I'm just building the highlight, but it's not exact, it's not specific, it's not perfect, it's actually quite scratchy, quite beaten and quite worn. Now once I've used the leather brown, I'm using a half and half mixture of leather brown and deep brown. So the leather brown is sort of a dark brown colour, and then the deep brown is a little bit sort of a lighter sort of orange colour as well. So as you can see, just looking at the deep brown on its own here, I'm using the tip of the brush just to create sort of like scratches and ununiformed patterns to make those boots look a little bit more worn and things like that. Now, if you go a little bit too much with the highlighted scratches and things, you can simply just use a little bit of a brown wash and just bring those colours back together and just tie those colours back in. So don't worry too much if the highlight seems a little bit over the top. You can easily sort of fix that by bringing them together and toning them back in. And once the boots are done, we're going to move on and just finish up the emblem on the back. So we're going to go back across and just pretty much do the same thing as we did when we put the original colours on. So we start in with our gold yellow, and as you can see I'm just painting the bombs, painting the writing, and just going to paint around the back of the hair. And as you can see, this gold yellow. Now, yellow is a colour that normally takes a couple of different layers to get the vibrancy out. But as you can see, once I'm painting across this twice, so I'm doing the two sort of layers at the same time here, you can see just how much that vibrancy then starts to pop as well. And then we're going to go back and do the basic skin tone, so we're just going to follow the limbs, so the arm and then just across the legs here, as this angel is sort of posing in this really cool sort of like a pin-up style pose. Just being as very careful as possible, again, because it's all such fine details, we're just using the very, very tip of the brush. And again, just painting that little dress just on the back there, that little bit of that ultramarine blue. And then just that sombre grey again. Now this time I'm trying, as you can see, just to use those brush strokes just in a straight line, so that hopefully we can leave a little bit of the colour in between and maybe kind of separate it so it does look a little bit more like wings. And then for the gun, nice and simple, we painted it black, and that's all we're going to do is just a quick light dry brush across the gun. Now I know I said earlier that I'd enjoy doing things that isn't dry brushing, but with weapons, to make them look worn and beaten and things like that, easiest way, paint it black, dry brush it quicksilver, nice light silver colour, and it should be as simple as that. Again, I've fallen in love with these little Resident Evil miniatures. There's so much character to them, despite the fact that they are very small and sometimes don't have the same amount of detail as some of the really big companies like Games Workshop. But there's so much nostalgia to be had when you're playing a game with a character as iconic as Claire. So you'll have to let me know in the comments below what you think of this paint job, what you think of this video, and if this is something that has helped you out or if you've just enjoyed it. But as always, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching, thank you for your support, and I will see you next time.